welcome to Spotlights. This is the podcast for the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. And as usual, I'm your host, Sam Mickey. And this week, I'm really happy to have a whole team of people here to talk about the new EcoJustice Hub on the Forum on Religion and Ecology website. And so to start, instead of me just giving introductions of this whole team, which is me talking way too much, let's just go in a round really quick and hear, who are you and what are you doing here? We'll start with Tara. Say a little bit.
Hi, I'm Tara Trappany, and I am the administrator of the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. And yeah, we just released this new EcoJustice Hub on our website. We've been working on it for quite some time, and we released it a couple weeks ago, and we're super excited to tell you more about it.
Nice. Liz, say a little about yourself.
Hi, I'm Liz Burkemper. I am a second year master's student studying religion and ecology at the Divinity School. And I jumped on the forum team over the summer and kind of devoted all of my time and work for the forum on this EcoJustice Hub. So I'm really excited to talk about it now that it's out.
Nice, very good. Eun Young, let's hear a little about yourself.
Hi, my name is Eun Young Choi. I'm also a second year of master's student studying religion and ecology. I also joined a team during the summer. I was very fortunate to work with a wonderful team, and I'm really excited to talk more about it.
Nice. And Leah, let's hear a little about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah. I am a recent graduate of Yale Divinity School. I graduated this past May in the MAR concentration in religion and ecology as well. And I am currently working part-time for the forum, and I'm also working part-time at a farm. It's a local organic vegetable farm.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, always good to hear anybody doing some farming. That's very good work, nourishing. I'll tell you, I've already recommended this hub to so many people. I don't know, it's, every email I've sent in the last couple of weeks or something, I'm like, by the way, this will be relevant to your work. So congratulations for putting this together. It's really remarkable. It's already a really remarkable website. There's so many resources for people to study religion and ecology. And so you'd think, well, just more resources. But this is so relevant to a lot of what's going on in environmental discourse right now. For environmentalism or for the climate movement, more and more people are like, yeah, if it's not about justice, I feel like we're missing something. And then they're like, well, where do I get resources for this? Where are all the people talking about it? And then here's one really convenient hub for that kind of work. And easily searchable, I found, which is saying a lot because it's so much material. It's not necessarily that easy to make it sortable, right? So I guess, the few questions I want to kind of pick everybody's brain about. And first off, what is eco-justice? And, it could mean different things to different people. Some people distinguish it from environmental justice. So I just want to know, for your own personal take on things, for each of you, what does eco-justice mean to you? And I guess we can go in the same order that we did last time, so we don't get too confused. So I'll start with Tara. What does eco-justice mean to you?
Well, in terms of the hub, creating it for the site, we didn't differentiate. We did use the terms eco-justice and environmental justice fairly interchangeably. Because we know certain people have attach different meanings to the different definitions, but we wanted it to be really broad enough that everyone could find it accessible and could find information in there that was useful to them. So we did keep it fairly broad. Getting into what it means to me personally, that does kind of get more to my own personal connection to all of this. Well, let me start with the forum site. So Mary Evelyn Tucker had been talking about this for a while, and we knew that we had resources across the site, lots of eco-justice resources across the site, but they weren't in any easily findable or cohesive place. So the first, and I have to give huge kudos to Liz, because she did most of this. I cannot take credit for this. The first thing was to go across the entire forum site, which, as you know, is quite large, and identify everything we already had. So what is eco-justice? To me, I have a very, my parents were very engaged in both Catholic and Quaker social justice action. So to me, it feels very natural, and I feel very good about the fact that we now have something on our site that's very justice dedicated. It's very timely, obviously, with everything that's going on in the world. At the same time, it's something that we've been talking about doing for quite some time. So we're glad that everything is aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, timely indeed. Yeah, it's amazing, right? The resources have been there, just harder to find. And so, yeah, it's a good time to kind of collect it together because everybody's clamoring for this kind of material for sure.
We added a ton, believe me, a huge amount more than was already there. But Liz really gave us a good foundation by finding everything that we already had, and then we just expanded and expanded and expanded. Yeah, with prioritizing things from the last couple of years, especially in the articles. Yeah,
Right.
We want to, a lot of. Especially in the news articles, we want it to be fresh and current, and history is very, very important, and we give historical resources. But because of everything that's going on in the world, we wanted to prioritize the fresher, newer ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very nice. Liz, can you tell us what is eco-justice?
Yeah, to me, eco-justice, it's very similar to what Tara was talking about, but eco-justice is about the well-being of all human beings on a thriving and healthy earth. And there's a huge element to me of like compensatory or reparatory justice involved, because historically environmental burdens and benefits are not fairly distributed. And that's just an exacerbated phenomenon in climate crisis. And yeah, I mean, I have a background in justice and justice work as well. I studied peace studies before coming to the Divinity School. So I'm very acquainted with, especially like fossil fuel divestment. But, there's like such a human component to this of like, who has access to green spaces, who has access to healthy environments and clean water and clean air. And it's not fairly distributed across Earth. So I think it's about making sure that everyone experiences the environment in fair ways. And just like looking out for all human beings.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Otherwise, the environmental crisis seems like a crisis for something out there. This other, there's something outside of us that has a problem. It's like, no, it's also very much a human crisis. Yeah, so very, very well said. Eun Young, what do you think? What's eco-justice?
Yeah, I think we pretty much have similar ideas. But speaking for myself, eco-justice means to envision the flourishing of the Earth community as one living body. So some would differentiate, as Tara said, eco-justice from environmental justice, but I think they share a common motivation to do justice, that they are dialectical. And eco-justice discovers the corruption and the broken relationships within the Earth community from a macrocosmic view, and provides conversations and actions that bring reconciliation grounded in justice.
Nice. Yeah, really good definition. Yeah, it's, I appreciate especially that each of us, we kind of the same idea of what eco-justice is, and yet each of us has a different way of articulating that in different scales, and some of these different words coming out: fairness, flourishing, getting a sense of what this is all about. So Leah, what's eco-justice?
Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add after these great definitions, but I guess just thinking that first of all, I definitely think of eco-justice and environmental justice the same. So I'll probably use environmental justice when I talk about it today, but the way we think about environmental justice has to be inherently intersectional, because we know that environmental justice and racial justice and gender justice are all intertwined. I can give an example for that. So we know in cities, we can see that historically redline communities, which are communities that are typically have higher number of residents of people of color or low income, are also subjected to greater amounts of pollution and less green space. So that's just an easy example to show the intersectionality there. And then also, I guess, from a religious perspective, just thinking through that the same moral impetus that pushes us to work towards social justice is also should be incorporated in environmental justice and vice versa. Especially as we see like the impacts of climate change manifest more and more, these are intertwined issues that can't be separated. Yeah.
Very good. You know, you mentioned intersectionality, which is such a I guess contested word these days in like politics, and it's on the lists in various places where people are trying to ban critical race theory in schools. There's all these words you can't say, and intersectionality is like one of them. Like, don't even say this in schools anymore. Even the word intersection, which I thought was funny. I'm like, how do we teach driver's ed without the word intersection? So I wonder if you could say a little just what intersectionality is, you know, for the folks at home who might not know what that term means, and because it has, you know, a specific meaning that isn't actually diabolical at all. So a little elucidation of that would be helpful.
Yeah, let me see if I can come up with one. So I guess the term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, I believe in, I don't remember, maybe the 90s. So that was her description for how race, class, gender, and other social categories intersect for people. So I believe, well, I'm not sure, but for example, for a Black woman is facing different issues than a white woman because of the intersection of race and gender in their lived experience. Yeah.
Right. Not that complicated. I don't know why somebody would be mad at that word. And for me, I kind of learned some of this stuff from ecofeminism as well, because people like Val Plumwood, Karen Warren, they're like, no, there's an underlying logic of domination or colonization, and it hits all of these different lines of difference, you know, race, class, gender, species. And so to me, it's, you know, it's pretty obvious if you think about history and the way our social systems impact our bodies. It's like, yeah, we all have multiple identities that we hold, and those identities intersect in different ways. So yeah, thanks for that kind of clarification. And you know, I guess the real issue for people listening is what is on this new website, right? What's on the hub? What kind of stuff can they find? I think when a lot of people think of religious approaches to environmental justice, it's just so dominated by Christianity. I know there's more than just that, and more than just religious perspectives. So I hope each of you can give us just a little sense of the kind of flavors that people are going to get from this hub. So we'll start with Tara. What kind of stuff specifically will people find on the website?
Sure. So on the landing page, we have some general information, both secular and religious. Some good historical overview. These are all links. I mean, they're not, we don't have full text anything there. That's why it's a hub, because we're directing people to where they can find it. So lots of historical information, a general overview, and then you'll find the links to the specific traditions. So we give resource lists for 11 different religious traditions, and then interreligious as well. Certainly some of them have much more, many more resources than others, but even the ones that don't have a lot, it's very interesting. Some of the traditions, like say Confucianism, may not have the engagement, but there is conversation happening, like what would eco-justice look like within this tradition? So it was interesting to build that. There were a couple traditions that we just could not find resources for, so they do not have a page, but we were very pleased at how much there was. And then it's broken down within those traditions into different categories, books and articles and engaged projects, etc. So hopefully, and I was very encouraging to hear you say it at the beginning, Sam, hopefully it is clearly and well organized enough that even though there's a lot of information, that people can find it easily and get to write what they're looking for. That's our hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I found it very, very searchable, and which is saying a lot because it is a tremendous amount of material.
It is a lot.
And so, but yeah, really, really well organized.
Yeah. So it's primarily religious engagement. But like I said, we do offer some more general and secular resources on the landing page to give context.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's important, especially, yeah, it just provides a bigger context for the different ways people approach this kind of topic. Liz, can you tell us a little bit about the website and maybe specifically your contributions to it? What were the things that you were working on, and what did you find maybe challenging in that process of digging stuff up and organizing and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so as Tara mentioned earlier, I had the big task of kind of looking through all of the forum's already existing listed resources on the site and just culling for like the most relevant and the juiciest like eco-justice stuff, because some things have like less of a focus on eco-justice than others. So I did a lot of culling and reading articles and rewatching videos and stuff like that. But I also found new stuff. One of the most interesting kind of pieces I found is that there's a lot going on with youth climate justice movements in India. And India is such like a rich religious space. And so there's like young Jains and young Hindus who are working towards climate justice. That was really cool. It was also really cool to find how much of the interreligious work is being done. That was probably like the second most populated section of the hub, alongside Christianity, because there's just like tons of interfaith communities who are getting together for climate justice, and in particular partnering with indigenous communities to protest like corporate encroachments on indigenous land and waterways. So that's really cool. And also, like, yes, there is a lot of Christian stuff, but I was surprised at what kind of Christian eco-justice resources are out there. And I think it's really important that there's a lot going on with engaging individual congregations. Like there's a lot of like other like resource hubs out there for like, how do you talk to your congregation about eco-justice? How do you prepare your congregation for climate disaster, both physically and spiritually? And I think that like small, like local work is really important in the broader eco-justice movement. So there's a lot that I looked through, a lot that was really exciting, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of work. And I appreciate it, especially because sometimes people have a title of an article that mentions the word justice, and you read the article and you're like, it really wasn't that much about justice. Or they'll say in the abstract and they'll throw that in there. It's a nice keyword to help you get published maybe. And you're reading it and there's like, there was just like one paragraph. So then you're the one out there being like, no, we're not going to include this one. Okay, this one says, that's a lot. And I like that point about congregations, especially. Really important for people to know this isn't just a hub for research, also a hub for community engagement. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy. I don't know if you know this book, but one of her principles of emergent strategy is small is good, small is all. And that kind of thing, like start where you're at, work with the people around you, and then we can really make change. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of publications. It's like, well, what's the point of this? Like, no, we're trying to transform our lives, transform our communities. It's one of the reasons it's such an important hub. Wherever you're at, if you want to change your community, you can use the resources on this hub. Eun Young, what do you think? What was some of the stuff that you worked on the website? And what were maybe some of the surprising things you found that run against our normal assumptions about what environmental justice or eco-justice are?
So I've been doing a lot of reading as well, going through resources, evaluating whether this resonates with eco-justice. So in that process, I've learned a lot about different discourses from different religious conversations, So there was a lot of learning experience. And after all, like, I just felt like it's mesmerizing to discover extensive and profound EJ resources already out there from various religion traditions that are full of wisdom to envision the flourishing of the interconnected world through justice work. What I really appreciate about the EJ Hub on the Forum website is it accommodates the wisdom to the public. And I think providing the accessibility to EJ sources per se is also one of the EJ works we can do. So that was very uplifting learning experience for me to just work with the Forum work and the EJ Hub.
That's a really great point, that making environmental justice materials accessible is part of this justice work. That's a really great point. Yeah, otherwise, it's only for people who have kind of access to libraries at elite institutions, who have, really good access to journals and things like that. Even some institutions, you only get a few journals that you can really access, and there's a few you can't. And it's hard to do that kind of searching. And it's very labor intensive. So the people who are really fighting for justice are like, I don't have this kind of time for research. And so you're like, don't worry, we did the research so you don't have to. We have it all organized for you so it's quickly accessible. So yeah, I appreciate that. That's a really good point. Part of justice is definitely doing the online work of creating these easily accessible hubs and resources. Leah, I'm curious, same thing for you. What was some of the stuff that you worked on? What was your contribution? And what were maybe some of the surprises that you found in this kind of research?
Yeah, so I was mainly working on preparing the bibliographies. So I didn't do as much reading, but mainly was just, typing all of the data into Zotero and spitting out some bibliographies for the site. I guess just thinking about what I'm surprised by, this is such a present issue, but we have so many resources from like 30, 40 years ago. And especially as a younger person, thinking that this is like something new, something that I only learned about maybe 5 years ago. And this is environmental justice is definitely something people have been thinking about for the past 30 years. Yeah, just the depth and the breadth of the resources was encouraging to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. It is one of those things that you hear things that kind of become popular within academic trends or within politics or something like that, and it seems like this new thing. And the more you dig, you're like, oh, it's been around. And that's one of the things I think you especially hear from indigenous communities, right? When people are like, there's this new thing happening, and they're like, we've been dealing with it for a long time. we've been talking about this stuff, and just that people haven't been listening. And then things are getting bad enough now, and people are getting organized enough now, where they're starting to come to the fore, and it's becoming a lot more obvious that these kind of movements are happening. So I've definitely felt that way with any environmental work I do. I'm like, oh, this seems interesting and new. And I'm like, oh no, it's been around. I'm just new to it. So let's get back into more of your kind of personal connections to this work, professional connections, and examples. What are the different types of environmental justice or eco-justice that matter to you, right? So Tara, I know you talked a little bit already about your personal connection. I want to hear more of that, and get into some of the examples. What does justice look like in your world, in your experience?
Yeah, so I think I was so eager to talk about the website that I didn't really fully answer your first question, what is eco-justice? So maybe I can now too, what is eco-justice to me? So yeah, so I have a background from the time before I was born. My parents were very active in Catholic social justice and Quaker organizations as well. So I kind of grew up with it just being a natural part of life, justice work. I mean, there was never a time when we weren't working and marching and boycotting, and it was just part of daily life. So for me, all of this feels like a long time coming, like it's very natural. And I'm so glad that we are integrating it into our daily work in a more conscious way. In my time at Yale, one of my, as a student, yeah, I graduated from Yale about YDS, Yale Divinity, about 15 years ago. The topic of distributive justice was one that was very much alive for me. I'm sure you know Willis Jenkins. In one of Willis's classes, I mean, we just would sit there and argue for hours, and distributive justice was something that just really spoke to me based on the way that I grew up as basic. Like, how can we even question this? So being able to now more consciously and overtly bring that into our work here at the Forum. It's always been there, always, absolutely. We're just making it more obvious, yeah, and more easily accessible. So that just feels really nourishing to me. Yeah.
I wonder, if you could say what distributive justice is, because I think it's always helpful to define some of these, because there are so many different theories of justice. I mean, geez, from like Plato and Aristotle and then on through the whole history of civilization. Everybody's got their own approach to justice. And more recently, we're hearing things about distributive, contributive, all these different, types of justice. So just for people who are unfamiliar, what is distributive justice?
I think the easiest way to see it is in climate. Obviously, nothing about climate issues is easy, but that's probably the place where you can most clearly see that actions taken by, Western or quote unquote developed countries are impacting other less affluent nations. And we need to distribute the wealth to make up for the harm that we're causing, as well as, we're certainly distributing the bad, we need to distribute the good as well. So yeah, I think that's probably where it's easiest to see, although not easiest to remedy, of course.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Easy to see, not easy to remedy. That's a big part of the challenge. Like, well, here's the problem. How do we fix it? Like, oh, it's a struggle. Organizing, right? You got to get people organized.
Yeah, get them to agree on things.
Yeah, right. I think that a lot. Like, one of the biggest problems that we have is building consensus about what the problems are and getting people to agree on like what exactly we should be focusing on. That's such a big challenge. It was so important that you're bringing together all these worldviews, because that's precisely the kind of work that needs to happen, right? Is seeing that different people have different perspectives, but we can find common ground and find a common purpose.
And I think that's one of the things that by the end of the creation of the hub was just so obvious. It's like there is so much common ground here across all of these traditions, even the ones that don't have as much active engagement, even just in the kind of the philosophical standpoint. There is so much common ground. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Liz, curious about your kind of personal and professional connections to this kind of work, and always happy to hear specific examples about the ways that you connect with it, relate to it, understand it, the way it impacts your life and your experience. So yeah, where does it show up for you?
Yeah, thanks for this question. One of my greatest personal and academic interests is kind of realizing or recognizing sacred multi-species relationships and sacred land relationship. And I think this idea really connects to how Tara and Young were discussing, this flourishing that we want. We want life to flourish on Earth, and we want to flourish together as human beings and also flourish with other species. And on the justice side of it, I was extremely privileged to grow up on rural farmland and have tons of access to, well water, from a spring, and clean air and beautiful fields to run around in. And I actually didn't fully appreciate it until I began studying at college in Washington, D.C. and living in an urban environment and being like, whoa, it's crazy to be surrounded by concrete all the time. What have I been not paying attention to? And not only in the very green place that I grew up in, but also like in the city, and like, you know, what's growing in the little spaces around me, what's trying to flourish in this space. And I really resonate with the thinker Emma Maris's definition of, or redefinition of, nature as any place where multiple species are living and thriving together. When you think about this definition of nature, you see nature everywhere, and you also see environmental injustices and climate injustice as a threat to, you know, humans and more than human species living in a thriving community together. And that's with, you know, toxic waste dumping, that's with, you know, a constant threat of floods and climate anxiety. You know, the EcoJustice framework really illuminates how this flourishing is that some people have, like with the land and with multi-species communities, it's not equally distributed right now. And how do we get to a place where everyone feels that they can flourish and really be in communion with each other and other species? Yeah, I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really interesting when I always like hearing people who have a kind of rural background, and then they're like, and then I started studying in college, and you're like, oh, the world is different out here. And that kind of perspective shift is enough to kind of just blow you open. You're like, okay, there's a little more going on than meets the eye. I really like that definition of nature from Emma Maris. I wonder if you could say a little about her work, because she does cool stuff that's always like that. It's, you know, she's like, we normally think the world is like this. It's easy divisions between nature and culture, or humans and wilderness, and it's actually a lot more messy, you know, rambunctious. So I wonder if you could say just a little bit about Emma Maris. I think she's worth highlighting.
Yeah, I mean, I think she often talks about this, like, you know, if you're thinking about like a vacant lot, for example, most people would not look at that and say, oh, look at this nature. But then there have been studies where if you just let a space like that be, whether it's like an empty parking lot or a vacant lot or anything like that, let it be. And in a year, there's going to be dozens and dozens of plant species, and then the animal species moving in to live with those plants. And that's nature. Like, that's something to be in awe of. And we really are losing out on something if we think of nature as pristine and separate and wild and not touched by human beings, because human beings are part of this living earth community. And so it's, you know, you can live in a natural way, or you can live with nature in a lot of different spaces, in a lot of varied spaces. And all of those are being threatened according to the EcoJustice lens. So I really appreciate Emma Maris's, like, just makes you look at the world differently and really appreciate, you know, all of these phenomena, all of the species that like we're coming into contact with every single day, and not necessarily paying attention to as we move through the world. And
Yeah, I know some scholars have talked about like plant blindness, that humans don't notice plants just because, I don't know, we're faster moving than they are. And then we just don't see it. And that's one of the things that's everywhere in cities. There's grasses and there's trees. And so, yeah, I find her work really hopeful for that, because I don't feel that it's such a desperate situation. Like, oh, we're all going to have to move out of cities. Can't have any more urbanization. Like, no, we could just think urbanization differently. Otherwise, you get that kind of John Muir environmentalism that's just very anti-civilization in a way. And it's like, well, guess who lives in the cities? A lot of times those are people who are more marginalized or vulnerable, and, you know, poorer folks or people of color. And so to kind of be anti-city is actually very unjust. So yeah, Emma Maris is like, well, yeah, we can complicate this narrative a lot. And yeah, so I really like that. I think that's, I don't know, it's hopeful. Anything that makes me feel good about our possibilities, I say go with that. Eun Young, I would like to hear a little bit about your kind of personal connection to stuff, or where it shows up in your professional work, you know, how your embodied experience connects with the issues of justice.
So I know it's like my story is a bit complicated, but I've been working a lot with children in more of an educational setting. And as a Christian, I always thought that my calling is to the next generation ministry. But as I've learned more about environmental degradation and climate change, the one question stood out to me was, what if there's no more next generation for me to educate them and help them nourishing their spiritual formation? So I've turned my focus to seeing more environmental justice work as the part of next generation ministry. And just to share briefly where I'm coming from, I was born in Korea, South Korea, but I was raised in Indonesia, and there are still ongoing air crises in both places, and those complexity of air pollution has been very interesting for me to think more about the nature and culture binary and how colonization or colonial mentality has been operating within the setting just to set up all these environmental issues. So right now at this point, I'm heading towards really researching and trying to build up a pedagogical way to address environmental issues, more from Christian perspective though, just to uplift and uplift the next generation ministry.
Yeah. I wonder if you could say a little, for people who aren't familiar with next generation ministry, what that is, and because it's such a powerful approach, and especially when you think there might not be a next generation, that urgency is profound.
Mm-hmm. So from my understanding of next generation ministry in a Christian setting is working with youth and like children. So it's more of a Christian spiritual formation kind of ministry. But I try to extend it more broadly as to think about the real future generation of the whole Earth community, not just like limited to human generation, but the whole community of the Earth.
Yeah, that's great. I wonder, if you could say a little about how the youth are handling this. Because I work with college age students, mostly undergraduates, a few master's students occasionally, the occasional like doctoral dissertation or something, but not with younger people. And so I wonder how it's hitting them. I mean, people refer to, I guess anybody really born after 1990, because at that point we're already over 350 parts per million, right, of CO2. And so then the climate is changed. It's the climate generation. They're like born into such tough times. So I wonder, like emotionally, intellectually, how are they handling this material?
So I think many young generation has been noticing the seriousness of climate change. I was in Boston in 2019 climate strike, and I've been able to see so many young adults and younger generations with their own message on the board, protesting. That has been really empowering, but also very heartbreaking at the same time, just to see how the younger generation or the future generation has to get the burden from the former generations. So I think we should continue this conversation and just educating and sharing resources has been very critical. I feel like for this time. But I think it should be a more gradual, ongoing movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I was at the climate strike in San Francisco, I guess a couple months ago now, the distant past, and it's inspiring to see. Because I know when I was that age, my involvement in activism was none. I'm like, no, I'm just playing video games or something. And the fact that you have young people who are so politically engaged is really, really remarkable. So it's a terrible burden that they bear, and yet it's really inspiring to see the confidence and the just the intelligent organizing with which they're handling it. Leah, I wonder if you could tell us about your connection to some of this work, personally, professionally, how it's shown up in your own experience.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about my job that I had while I was a student at Yale. So while I was at Yale, I was working for the Urban Resources Initiative, and they are both a nonprofit and part of Yale School of the Environment, and they do a lot of the urban forestry in the city. And so they are a great example of how kind of the traditional environmental fields, such as forestry, can be just tweaked a little bit, and you can throw on the environmental justice lens, and it totally changes the way you do your work, and really works to empower local communities. So they practice community-based forestry, which is basically is a form of forestry in which local people are given decision-making control of forest management. So the way that works in New Haven is that residents can request street trees to be planted. So trees in the city won't be planted unless the resident requests it and commits to watering it. And then also during the summer months, local residents can see a vacant lot, for example, or a streetscape, and they can say, we want to transform this into a green space that is functioning for our community. And Urban Resource Initiative will provide supplies and technical expertise for that. And so on the ground, environmental justice shows up in a couple different ways. First and foremost, a lot of the tree planting efforts are focused in low canopy neighborhoods, which are typically low income or predominantly people of color. So there's multiple reasons for this. I guess one would be like heat island effect is going to be stronger in areas where there are low tree canopies. So thinking about rising temperatures, that's an important thing to build up the tree canopy a little bit. And then also with their tree planting efforts, they have a green job program. So it's not just your typical environmental workers who are the foresters. It is both youth from a local high school. So there's a green job training for high schoolers. And then there's also green job training for New Haven locals who are returning to the workforce after experiencing incarceration. So they kind of have justice throughout the whole process of their work there. And then their summer programs, again, just to reiterate, most of the, it's called their green space program. It's when residents can, take whatever they want to in their own project and plant kind of what they want out of a vacant lot or a streetscape. And so those are also predominantly in low income neighborhoods, is where the efforts have been. And then they've also done some work in like soil remediation for lead around the community as well, is what that was born out of. So I worked in urban forestry for about 2 years while I was there. That's definitely something I'm looking towards moving back into. I think it has a really high potential for kind of hitting, checking off the boxes for environmental benefits in a city, but also really being justice oriented as well.
Yeah, I love the job training as part of that too. That's fantastic. And I think, it's got to be one of the best sectors to prepare for employment in because of the terrible problems we're dealing with, and we need more people who are working in environmental work, sustainability. Everybody's going to have to start chipping in. So I would think that's got to be some of the most secure employment available right now. And I wonder who decides what kind of trees get planted. Because I don't know, like around where I live in Northern California, there's a surprising amount of palm trees. I'm like, these aren't from here. But people are like, no, we want to feel that kind of fun in the sun. I'm like, no, maybe in LA. And of course, they're not native there either. But here, like, they don't thrive very well. Who decided that, right? So, I mean, I wonder if, or if somebody's like, we'd like to make this a green space full of invasive exotics. And, is anybody going to check that, who gets to decide the species that are being planted?
Yeah, there are foresters on staff who keep a running list of trees that can be planted. And then depending on the project, maybe, so like myself, when I was an intern, I had some decision-making authority. So I would typically push people towards native plants. And then we never plant invasives. So there are non-natives, but ones that will work in the environment where they're being planted.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. Yeah, I know I have a friend who's trying to grow a banana tree. I'm like, that's not gonna happen on a foggy part of the Northern California coast. Like, good luck. That seems, I don't know, I really like that, and I would like to see stuff like that in other cities. Do you know if other places are doing that or replicating this? Because it sounds like a really great program.
Yeah, I do know Denver has kind of a similar program. I think New York City has, I mean, not as extensive, but it has some similar programs as well. So there are probably a couple others too. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I always feel like if you can empower communities, then you can do the work. Because I've never met anybody who's like, yeah, in my community, I hope that we have less clean air and dirty fresh water and food with no nutrition. Like, no, people want all the good things. So if you can just empower communities, the things will come up. Pretty simple, it seems. So that's good. All these, there's such hopeful examples. I really appreciate that. You never know when you're talking about justice with people how you're gonna leave that conversation with just much despair and trepidation, or with a sense of hope and courage. So I don't know. Geez, we could talk forever. I really like hearing everybody's stories. Maybe we could close, go around, and kind of say, what's one thing you want people to take away, whether it's intellectual, emotional, a practice, an organization to connect with. What's one thing you'd want people to take away from either the EJ Hub on the Forum website, or just more generally from the world of EcoJustice? So just a kind of final thought, one takeaway. So we'll start with Tara.
Well, I pick up on what you were just saying, Sam. I would say that hope is the big takeaway. Although there were moments during the construction of this, I mean, I'm sure Liz was there too, and probably everybody. But I know I had some pretty dark moments after spending days and weeks going through articles and just feeling tragic and broken at a lot of what is happening. But by the end, and seeing how much there is going on, I think that's where the hope comes in, because the articles aren't just about the articles, the books, the videos, all the resources. The point of the justice work is it's not just about all of the things out there that are broken. It's about everything that everyone is doing. And there is so much going on, so many efforts happening. And like we put, I think we put a Robert Bullard quote right on the landing page about the youth, that is just, Mary Evelyn Tucker is always talking about it, and her hope is contagious. So that's where I have hope, is how much is going on and how much the youth of the world are doing.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. That's a good one. Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I think one big takeaway is that creation care, or any way that you want to frame like environmental work, is not just about caring for trees and just like general environmental protection. It's not about like just preserving like wild places or like majestic places, because human beings are part of creation. Human beings are part of nature, and there's a lot of danger when we separate ourselves from that, in the way that we speak, in the way that we act. And also, like, creation is connected, and you can't just put your waste or put the burdens of climate crisis in one area of the world and expect that everything's going to be okay. We're all connected, and there's Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we can truly care for creation without including everyone and seeing what has historically been done. So I think it's a really important frame to have, especially in religious spaces moving forward.
Nice. Yeah, it reminds me, the climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe has a new book out called Saving Us. She's like, we're always so focused on saving nature, saving the environment. This is about all of us, people. So yeah, great example. Eun Young, what do you think?
I think there's more struggles coming for us. And it's a journey of finding hope midst of crisis. But I think that the longing for justice is always rooted in love and compassion for the world. And from EJ work, I hope to see love and compassion just covering the entire earth.
Nice. Cannot argue with that. Leah, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'll finish by quoting the title of one of our resources in the bibliography. This is in Yes magazine. The title is Climate Justice is Racial Justice is Gender Justice. So just reminding all of us and all of the listeners that our work has to be integrated with other social justice movements. Yeah.
Nice. That's a great title. Wonderful. That's all good things. I'm really excited about this. Thanks really to each of you for putting in a really tremendous amount of work and the gravitas with which you're having to expose these kinds of issues. So I really appreciate it. And I'll keep sharing this material with other people. I'm already so excited about it. Already rethinking how I'm designing my syllabi to include this kind of material. So yeah, thanks so much to each of you, Tara, Liz, and Young, Leah. Really appreciate you being here. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more conversations for you. In the meantime, take care and be well.